Indiana football is on a much needed bye week as we near the end of the regular season, and hopefully the Hoosiers are getting healthy.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day, and we are now the #1 sports podcasting network. So thank you so much for making that so, and for making Locked On Hoosiers your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download it today. Well, we got a lot to get to on this episode of Locked On Hoosiers. We'll talk about the basketball team as they are just outside the top 25 of the AP poll, but they did creep in to the top 25 of the coaches poll, and how the Hoosiers can continue to win games and find themselves climbing up in the rankings. Plus, it's Tuesday, which means new playoff rankings come out for college football. We'll make some predictions and projections on what could happen tonight and how Indiana should still remain as the #2 team in the country. But we begin today's show with a topic that appears to be ongoing, and it has been on this show, and it seems like it is in the Hoosier fan base. The idea that this is not just a much needed bye week this week for Indiana football with Curt Cignetti. It's perfectly timed. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a better bye week if you're Indiana. Maybe before last week's game, but honestly, I like where you stand because you've played 6 games in a row since your last bye week, and that's a lot of football, right? In this new era where you get 2 bye weeks per season. I like that. I think it's necessary. I think across the board, it's keeping college football fresh. It's keeping guys healthier, right? For the most part, I know things still happen, but I just think generally that's helping the sport. But playing 6 games in a row in between your bye weeks is a lot. And so while you did have to play all those games, now you get a chance to get refreshed. Now you get a chance to hopefully get healthy and prepare for what's going to be an awesome game against Purdue next Black Friday night in West Lafayette. But you're also getting a chance to get prepared for the Big Ten championship game, which you are still well on your way to being a part of against the #1 team in the country right now, the Ohio State Buckeyes, who will most likely be the most physical team that you play. But you're also trying to get prepared for a college football playoff, which if you do it right and you make a run, that's 3 extra games you have to play. The quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the national championship game. That, of course, being if Indiana is still a top 4 seed, which we'll talk about that coming up in our next segment. And so you use this opportunity to hopefully get guys like Elijah Saratt or Drew Evans, or even your long kicker, Frankie, right? Trying to get those guys back and healthy and 100%, and still trying to take care of Kalon Black, who got banged up against Wisconsin. Aiden Fisher, who I know has been back, but I don't think he's 100%, but he's getting close, but you have an opportunity for him to take the week off. Michael Kamara, guys in the secondary. I mean, there's a lot of injuries here that you have to worry about. And so Indiana is hopefully going to take this week off and just rest, take some time and not worry about playing a football game, the stress of a game, the preparation for a game, the work that it takes to go through a game day and perform at your highest level. Hopefully the Hoosiers are getting healthy. But I'm also looking past that a little bit. And why I think this is almost a perfectly timed bye week is you hopefully can cheat a little bit here if you're Indiana. I'm not saying to completely overlook the Purdue Boilermakers, but you are going to be favored pretty heavily against them. And if you play your best game, you should beat them by 3 or 4 touchdowns. There's a reason their record is what it is, and it's bad in case you haven't looked. You will be favored to beat them, and you should beat them in a 4-quarter game by several scores. You have an opportunity here in this bye week to start preparing for the possibility of a Big Ten championship game. You also have the possibility to start preparing for college football playoff games. Now, with that, you don't necessarily know who your opponents are going to be because clearly there's a lot more changes coming in the playoff rankings, which again, we'll talk about in a moment, and what that will become between now and the final rankings and the final bracket. And I'm not even necessarily talking about preparing for specific opponents other than Ohio State. You can start throwing in some wrinkles if you want to. If you're Cignetti and the coaching staff, whether it's Brian Taines on defense or Mike Shanahan on offense, you have a chance to sit down and throw in some new things to the system that people haven't seen before. I'm not saying to change your identity and go away from the things that got you here because you're one game away from an undefeated season, which would be the best in the history of Indiana football. You're a game away from representing IU in the Big Ten championship game, and you're a game away from all but securing a top 4 seed in the college football playoff. I'm not saying to go away from what has made you successful. I'm simply saying you can put in some new things that people have not seen, that opponents don't know about, that maybe you've been keeping in your back pocket for certain situations, the Buckeyes or in the college football playoff. That's what the bye week is for, especially for the coaches, where you can kind of game plan and strategize a little bit and figure out, okay, what can put us over the top? Because clearly the last couple of games have not been the most pretty performance, have not been the best thing you've put on the field this year. So you've got to find ways to get over some of those humps. And I think a week off just altogether, mentally, physically, emotionally, will allow you to do that. I'm saying I could see the Indiana staff just finding some new things to put in and discuss and strategize on that gives you the best chance to beat Purdue, to beat Ohio State, and to win a national championship. Because all three of those things are still on the table. You don't have to do them all, right? You don't have to beat Purdue to win a national championship, but it would be nice. You don't have to beat Ohio State to win a national championship, but it would be nice. But if you win both of those games or one of them or none of them, it doesn't matter. You are still going to have a chance to win the national championship. And so you have more games to play and you've got to be ready to go. I'm saying this is a perfectly timed bye week for several reasons. And I just hope that Indiana takes advantage of it because it's rare to have one this late in the season, in the second to last week of the regular season, right before your rivalry game. So hopefully Indiana uses that, takes advantage of it. And at the end of the day, you just got to get healthy, get refreshed, and be ready to go to make a run at a national title. All right, coming up here on Locked On Hoosiers, we will stick with football for now because tonight, more college football playoff rankings come out, which means a new bracket, and we get to debate and talk about what the playoffs could look like in a couple of weeks. We make our picks and predictions right after this here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. College football is here, and I could not be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's really just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. It's the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I've pulled up Game Time several times and pulled up some of the biggest games for as low as $25. Those are deals you just can't beat. So whether it's football or basketball or pro hockey or whatever the case may be, if you're looking to go to a sporting event, Game Time is the only place you need to look. Take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. We hit 7K last week, and we have blown right past it. So we're on our way, 7,100, 7,200, and on our way to 8,000. So I want you to be a part of that. So thank you so much for doing that. It's free. It's easy. Just tap it with your thumb. You'll be notified when we post new episodes. Also, when we go live after Indiana men's football, men's football and men's basketball games here on the YouTube side. So make sure you do that. And then if you're listening on audio, subscribe to us there. Follow us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, however you find us. Thank you for supporting us. All right, so we continue talking college football, and we start with we started with the bye week, and now we talk about the playoff rankings because it's Tuesday, which means we're going to have more rankings coming out tonight. And we're going to have some movement. We're going to have some drama because a couple of teams lost and some teams won and got some resume building wins, but you had a pretty big upset. Alabama goes down in the SEC, so everybody should move up, right? And I want to show this again for those of you watching on YouTube. You're going to get this graphic again today. It's the AP Top 25, which is not directly relevant to the college football playoff. It just gives us an idea of what we could see in the college football playoff rankings tonight, right? Ohio State 1, Indiana 2, Texas A&M 3, and Georgia moves up to number 4. And I think we finally have got past the debate that A&M should jump Indiana, right? Because of A&M's close call this weekend, where give them credit, dude. They had to come back from a 30-3 deficit at the half at home. Like, that's not really what you're looking for if you're a college football team this late in the season, but they did come back. They win that game against South Carolina 31-31, but I think they should stay at their spot of number 3 behind your Indiana Hoosiers. But the news is that Georgia moves up to 4, Ole Miss at 5, Texas Tech 6, Oregon 7, Oklahoma 8, Notre Dame at 9, and Alabama at 10. I think the college football playoff rankings will be fairly similar to that, which should set up for some incredible matchups, okay? And I am thinking that your top 4 will be that of the college football playoff rankings. I think it'll be Ohio State, Indiana, Texas A&M, and then Georgia. And then you start getting into some fascinating ones. And by the way, I want to remind people, especially you Hoosier fans, that Indiana is the beneficiary of a rule change this year, where if you remember last year, the top 4 conference champions got the first round buys. That's not the case anymore. You're guaranteed a spot. You're just not guaranteed a bye. That's why a team like Miami could be 10 or 11, maybe 9. I doubt they'd put them at 12, but that's why Miami or Georgia Tech, whichever one gets in, that's why that team will not have a top 4 seed and a first round bye. That's why you're seeing right now 2 Big Ten teams and 2 SEC teams. And I think that's how it should be. I hate that last year, the first year of the expanded playoff, was the litmus test, or the what's the other term, whatever it is. But that was like the test for what the playoff committee wanted to do. And they were like, I guess maybe that didn't work the way we wanted it to. Okay, let's manipulate it again and change it. Like, you're talking about teams who are competing for championships here. You're talking about kids who are participating in once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, and you're just kind of throwing it out there and seeing what works. You're tossing it against the wall like a piece of spaghetti to see if it sticks. I don't like that from the playoff committee, but they don't have the players or teams or coaches or fans' best interest in mind, so what can you expect, right? But regardless, Indiana is benefiting from the rules changes, which is why the Hoosiers are still ranked inside the top 4. And you see that represented with their seed line in these different brackets. But I think you're looking around at Texas Tech possibly being 5. Ole Miss might jump up there to be 5, but I see them being 6 in my rankings. I think Oregon will be that 7th team. I hate that they're going to put Notre Dame at 8 or 9. I don't think they deserve it. I think Notre Dame is stealing a bid. I think their resume sucks. I'm not giving you credit for beating a mediocre Pitt team who they ranked just to give Notre Dame a top 25 win. I'm not going to give you credit for it, but I'm not on the committee, so they don't ask me. So Notre Dame could be in there, or what they will be in there, but either the 8 or the 9, I think them and Oklahoma could be either way, either one, which is fascinating because whoever the 8 seed is hosts the 9 seed, right? So that's a big deal, whether it's Notre Dame going to Oklahoma or Oklahoma hosting Notre Dame. But I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. Seems like North Texas is the G5 team because of what Navy and South Florida are up to. Navy beating South Florida this weekend. So it's a major cluster. It absolutely is. Miami's going to sneak in there as that ACC team, or Georgia Tech, whichever one, right? That's kind of where everything stands in the ACC, in a conference that I think is terrible. So overall, Indiana will not move. Indiana will be fine. The Big Ten is still on the verge of getting 3 teams in to the college football playoff, but I don't think Michigan gets in. I know they've convinced themselves that if they go out and beat Ohio State, then there's a shot, because I know mathematically there's some crazy situation, right, where the Wolverines could get to the Big Ten championship game. I think that's still a possibility. I saw that somewhere. That's wild that they think that that's going to happen and that they would get in. Maybe, but I don't think so. USC, even though they beat Iowa, hey, another close loss for the Hawkeyes, baby. We should move them up in the rankings. USC, I don't trust to slide in there as well. So I think the Big Ten, because of a team like Notre Dame, because of the G5 guarantee, and because the SEC is pretty darn good, I think you're capped at 3 teams out of this conference. But what's crazy here is if this holds, this would be 1 Big 12 team in and 1 ACC team in, because I don't know if BYU can find their way in. I don't know if, who are the other teams? I'm trying to think. Out of the Big 12, you just don't have them. You just don't have those things. Houston maybe, but I doubt it, right? I don't think you have what it takes to get these teams in there. And so Indiana's fine and the Big Ten's fine, but the SEC's got some serious arguments here, and they've got chaos going on in that conference. But regardless, for the Hoosiers, you keep winning and you're fine. You drop a game to Purdue, and then you threaten to drop out of the top 4. Drop a game to Ohio State in the Big Ten. If you lose both of those, then you're probably going to have to, there's a chance you have to go somewhere. But even if you drop one of the final 2, you have a chance to host a game in Bloomington, which would be pretty phenomenal to me. But here's the bottom line is whatever happens in the rankings tonight, whatever the bracket looks like tonight, it's going to change and it's going to look different. This will not be the final one. This will not be the blueprint of what the actual playoff will be. It's going to give us a great idea, but there are still some big games this weekend and then rivalry weekend that are going to impact the college football playoff. You've got Georgia, Georgia Tech. You've got Texas and Texas A&M. You've got Auburn and Alabama. You have Indiana and Purdue. You have Ohio State and Michigan. You've got a lot of big games in there. Oregon and Washington play right in the end of the season. So you've got big games in there that could really impact and shake this thing up. And so you can't buy too much in it. But Indiana will be fine. You're on the bye. You should still be the number 2 team. And if you win your games, everything will work out. All right, coming up in our final segment of Locked On Hoosiers, we will flip over to basketball, where Indiana's knocking on the door of the top 25. The Hoosier football team is ranked 2nd, and basketball is trying to find a number next to their name as well, and a cool stat that the Big Ten put out as well. We talk about that and how the Hoosiers could get ranked right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. So, if you want a live bet on Thursday Night Football or on Saturday afternoon college football or a random random college basketball game on a Wednesday morning. You can do all of that with FanDuel. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here and making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And we flip over to basketball and want to talk about a cool stat. I guess it's a stat, technically, that the Big Ten Network actually put out. And it's pretty awesome. It's talking about Indiana football, men's basketball, and women's basketball. And as of right now, at least as of Monday, right, and as of today, Indiana is the only team and the only school in the country who has an undefeated football team, men's basketball team, and women's basketball team. Hoosier football is 11-0, and both men and women's basketball teams are 4-0. So I think that's pretty cool. Shout out to the Big Ten for noticing that, making a little graphic for it, and definitely wanted to shout that out because, man, that's incredible. And I know that it's early on in the basketball season, but good things are happening in Bloomington across the board. And that's a big shout out to Scott Dolson, your AD, the entire collective, the entire group of boosters, all the people on the board, everybody who's involved with Indiana athletics and at the university itself deserves a lot of credit and should be celebrated when things like this happen. And now you're talking about an Indiana men's basketball team that's knocking on the door of the top 25, which is really, really impressive to me, right? You pull up what the top 25 looks like. We got the new AP poll that came out on Monday, and you compare side by side, right? The AP poll and the coaches poll. Now, I like to use Ken Pom and net rankings and things as well, and we'll dive deeper into those as we get some more games under our belt. And I'm talking about college basketball as a whole, right? It's hard for me to put a lot of stock into those, even though they're great and I love them. I love what those rankings do and what they represent and how accurate and how deep they go. But we're 4 games in, man. Some teams have only played 3. Like it's hard for me to put stock in them this early. But what you can put stock in is the fact that Indiana is ranked in the top 25 of the coaches poll at number 25, and Indiana's just outside of the top 25 in the AP poll as the second team with the most received votes. Okay, ranked 25th in the coaches poll. You're right behind Vanderbilt, right in front of NC State. In the AP poll, which you can take whichever one you want. Coaches poll is obviously voted on by the coaches. AP poll is by all the AP voters. NC State's at 25. San Diego State is the first team out, and your Indiana Hoosiers are right there as the second team out. So you could say the 27th ranked team in the country if you really wanted to. And, you know, I wonder how much the game on Sunday evening for Indiana against Incarnate Word probably had something to do with this from the AP poll voters, but I'll say it like it is. How many of the AP poll voters actually took the time on Sunday afternoon to watch Indiana play Incarnate Word? I'm going to guess probably 80 to 85% of them didn't even know the Hoosiers were playing, okay? Most of them look at records, they look at box scores, and they look at logos. That's just what they do, and it is what it is, because you have several teams who are ranked ahead of you as Indiana who already have a loss. Kansas, Auburn, Arkansas, UCLA, okay, Texas Tech, St. John's, Kentucky. They all have losses, those teams do. Now, a lot of those are good losses, and I will give you credit for those, but it goes back to preseason rankings are kind of stupid because now we are rewarding and or punishing teams for where we ranked them in the preseason. Doesn't make a ton of sense, but this is about Indiana. And what I'm saying is the Hoosiers are right there. And you have every opportunity to go and be a ranked team in the next week or two. You take care of business against Lindenwood this Thursday, you've got a P4 team in Kansas State coming in next week who's also undefeated as of right now on the season, 3-0 with a win over California in P4 play. So you have an opportunity to boost your resume there. You then play a team in Bethune-Cookman who I think is an NCAA tournament team. You have a chance to boost your resume there. You then go on the road to Minnesota. You take on Louisville. You host Penn State. You go on the road to Kentucky. We're going to find out exactly how good this Indiana team is early in the season and whether they deserve to be ranked in the top 25. But the fact of the matter is, you're 4 games in to a new era with Darian DeVries, with a brand new team, a brand new system, brand new year, and you're already flirting with the top 25. That's a big, big deal. And I think it is a good sign for what's happening here and what Darian DeVries is doing with this Indiana team. Again, I know Sunday was not pretty, but those types of nights are not going to happen a ton for Indiana's offense. They will every now and then, but I expect the Hoosiers to fight through it. I expect them to bounce back and have good games here over the next week or so. And you might just find yourself ranked in the top 25, and I think that would be pretty cool. Does it mean a ton at the end of the day? No, because you still got to play the games and you still got to win them. But being ranked and having that respect nationally is something that I think is good for Indiana basketball just altogether, for the team, for the fans, for recruiting. And I just think that's exciting. And I hope that that's the case. I hope Indiana can get in there and start to slowly climb up those rankings as we get closer to Big Ten play. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers, man. Thank you so much again for being here, making this your go-to spot, your first listen or your first watch every single day, and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network. You are the reason for that, so thank you for making that so. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on your audio platforms, and keep up with us on social media as well, as we post daily episodes on YouTube and audio, plus we go live after men's basketball games and football games as well, okay? We are back tomorrow for another episode, Hoosier fans. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.